Okay, friends, I am so excited to bring to you one of my very best friends in the world, also my life coach, Amy Snow. She's coming from us. She's coming from her living room or her house here. And so, for those of you who are able to watch via video, you get to see our faces. Otherwise, you'll be listening to us through podcasts. So grateful to have her here with me today. Our story goes several years back now, where we met through our network marketing company. We were both health coaches through the network marketing company that I participate in. And we ran into each other in line for a workout at our big conference. And turns out we live, just maybe 3-4 miles down the road from each other here in northern Indianapolis. And we just decided, oh gosh, we connected, we should remain friends. So we stayed in touch. And a couple of years later, she went on to receive her John Maxwell Life Coach certification and reached out to me and said, hey, would you be willing to have coffee to talk about this concept of personal growth? And it was something that I had gotten into myself and was really starting to see internal transformation with. For those of you who've not heard my story about personal growth, I always kind of assumed that my own development was dependent on others. It was dependent on my professional career. And so I was working at that time in corporate America, and I was constantly asking my management in that job for growth. I was asking to attend conferences. I was asking for more. And I was constantly told no. I was told, no, you can take a sick day and do that, or you can do it on your own time. But I didn't really have the sort of aha moment until probably around the time that I started with my network marketing company, that personal growth was really my choice, and it was my own journey, and it was something that I didn't need outside permission for. And so I had really kind of started with listening to books and reading books and listening to podcasts around the time that Amy kind of stepped into my life. And then, of course, she went on to become a life coach and said, hey, I would love to work with you and your team. And it was just divine timing. It felt like the right time. It felt like the right connection. It felt like the universe brought us together for that reason initially. And from that point on, we've established a great friendship. My kids refer to her as Aunt Amy. So Aunt Amy, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks. I am so excited to be here, Jenny. And I love being Aunt Amy to your girls.
Yeah. So first of all, Amy, I just want everybody to hear from you. What is your story? Like, how did you get to where you are now? I mean, you can tell as much as you want, but
Right.
what started your own personal growth journey, and what brought you to life coaching?
Yeah, I mean, it's, my journey is an interesting one. Just to give you a quick, a rundown, I guess. I mean, out of, college and grad school, I was a math teacher for a couple of years, and then went into full-time music ministry with a ministry called Crew. They had Keynote at the time, and I'm a guitarist and singer, and I toured the world and the country for, gosh, a lot of years, over 13 years, and I was with them for 16. And and I knew that there was a change coming, and I got connected with a friend who had his own leadership coaching business. He was a solopreneur, and he asked me to come alongside him, and that was my first foray, I guess, into that world. And was with him for a few months, and I was really, it kind of just gave me the initial, like, I guess my initial love for it, but it wasn't necessarily the right setting for me. And then at that point, I actually ended up talking with a friend who was an executive coach, and she was like, man, you just, given your wiring and the different assessments that I had shared with her, she's like, coaching seems like a great fit for you. And I said, I agree. I haven't found the right place yet. And it was very soon after that I found out about the John Maxwell team. And there was just so much about it that resonated with me. Just who John Maxwell is, and the team and family environment that it offered, and also just top-notch content. Like, I'm not a content creator, so I'm all about wanting to come alongside people and help them in their journey to become, better in who they are, better as leaders in their sphere of influence, And so being able to have access to such incredible content and then be able to tweak it for whatever environment that I'm in has been such a privilege, you know. So it was, yeah, so I became certified as a John Maxwell coach and leadership trainer and speaker. I zero in more in on the coaching and training. And I absolutely have loved that because I love helping to develop people. And like I said, I mean, you've said this to me before. It's like my mantra is come alongside. And that's what I love to do with both men and women, but particularly women, you know, because I in that sphere, not only in my business world, but personal world as well, and in people's and women's like spiritual journeys. I love being able, you know, they call that it's mentoring, discipleship. I mean, it's really such a common thread and theme in my life of being able to come alongside people in their journeys. So yeah, I guess that's the overview of how I got into it.
Yeah. It's interesting because from the first time we met, I could sense this. There's just sort of something about Amy's presence that is very, open. And I think because you have, the way that I always like to say it is, I call it the Amy pause. You have this sort of pause about you that's like just almost inviting people to open up and to say, to really share what they really feel and what they're struggling with, and or even how they're succeeding and how they're thriving. And there's just something about you that is like so warm and welcoming and open that it just, of course you would be a life coach. Like in my mind, I'm like, yes, of course you fell into this because you are just so good at listening and asking the right questions, even though most of the time those questions are just a sort of a regurgitation of whatever the person has said. So as an example, I'll say, I'm really struggling. Sometimes in our life coaching sessions, I'll say, I'm really struggling with XYZ. And then the question I get back is, well, why do you think you're struggling with XYZ? So a lot of times the question is like really just digging deeper into the thought processes that people are having. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation. Before we go on, this is still rubbing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. So I think it's actually like where your zipper meets. And I think it's that little mouthpiece. So I don't know if you want to just like roll your collar in. It's like that little,
let's see here. Yeah, it's
that little thing is like when you're talking, it like moves. And so it like rubs. Yeah. So we'll see if that's better.
There we go. This will be for those who get to watch this.
They'll be like, what a cool shirt. They'll be like, where'd she get that from? That's so cool.
Well, want me to just take it off?
It sounds a lot better now. Yeah. It just like when you were talking and moving, it was like rubbing up against that zipper, I think.
All right.
So, okay, cool. Let's dive back in. Okay. So, one of the things that I mentioned before was sort of my own story with not knowing what I didn't know. And I think it's safe to say that there are a lot of people, there are a lot of women out there who don't necessarily realize yet that personal growth is something that they initiate. So my question to you to get us started today is, what does it mean to invest in personal growth? What does it mean to have a personal growth plan?
That's a great question, Jenny, because, I you've heard me reference this book a lot, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth by John Maxwell. The very first chapter is called The Law of Intentionality. And the little subtitle says, growth doesn't just happen, and because I think that's what a lot of us can get into, right? We think, well, I'm just going to grow because I'm getting older or I'm gaining experience. And, as John often says too, experience isn't our greatest teacher. Evaluated experience is. And I think sometimes we just need help and just how do we evaluate our experience, and just having some good questions to do that. So I think, in my own journey, I was pretty, when I was telling you like my transition, when I was in full-time ministry and then I got into coaching, like, I had to blow some cobwebs off my own brain and journey. Cause I had invested in myself, definitely physically. The whole fitness and nutrition piece has always been a passion because, I'm an athlete. And that's just been part of my DNA. And then, even from a spiritual sense, and when I was in, in the ministry, those were two areas that were vibrant. But there were other parts of me, which there are a lot of other parts of me that had really gotten, I guess, I don't, for lack of a better word, had weakened because I hadn't been developing them. And that personal growth piece, whether it's just personal development with, gosh, I look back and I think, gosh, if I'd only known then what I know now, if I had known to take the journey into developing myself as a leader, because I was in leadership positions a good portion of my time, obviously as a teacher, but then in ministry too. And I mean, I did, right? You do as well as you can with what you know and what you have. And so even just getting involved with the John Maxwell team, it kind of reignited my passion to learn and to grow. But that can feel very overwhelming too, because it's like, well, where do you begin? And because there's a lot of areas of our life that need attention, right? That need growth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about, I have this wheel of life that I do with all my clients that just kind of gives you a kind of an overview of your life. Has you assess, like, yeah, where am I in my faith, in my finances, in my, fitness or my wellness, friends and family, it's my personal growth, kind of fun. There's lots of different areas. And I think, we can't pay attention, like focus in on each of those areas all the time, but yeah. And I noticed that some of those places for me had become anemic, and so it's like, okay, I need to spend some very intentional time developing these places in my life that I've kind of just let go, or just kind of figured, well, it's just, it's kind of the status quo, and I don't want to live in the status quo or in the, staying average. So I think too, getting around other people who love to grow and to get better, that's such an inspiration, and keeps me wanting to learn and get better. And especially too, as a life coach and a leadership trainer, to keep growing myself, because I want to be able to, add value in ways that's really relevant and current, and that I'm constantly putting myself out there to learn things that can help benefit not only myself, but in the people that I'm serving. So, the whole personal growth, it can feel like, okay, where do I begin? And it really is kind of, that's part of the process I take people through, whether it's a personal and a one-on-one context or in a group setting, and like masterminds, which, we'll talk more about later. But it's a great way to just say, all right, you want to grow as a leader, let's say, then there's a specific place I have people start, and we walk through that journey to get an action plan, to just start taking steps. Because that's the thing, it doesn't have to be giant leaps. It's like taking time every day to invest in me is going to keep me moving in a direction that's going to get me better. Because that's one of the things I think sometimes, especially for women, we say, gosh, I want to take some time out to invest in myself. Women can feel like, they tend to put themselves on the bottom of the list as far as priorities. And gosh, that's a misnomer, because I think investing in yourself is one of the best ways that you can love the people in your circle, in your family, in your friend group, in the people that you're working with or serving with. Because as you invest in you, it's like, you think about it, you have more to give. You have, your impact grows because of that, versus kind of serving out of an empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
As you pour into yourself, you're able to pour more out. And I know we work, and getting to work with your team, and I've worked with a lot of teams that have, right, a lot of moms, and they want to love their kids well, and this is one of the ways that they can do that, is by investing in themselves. And also it's setting an example for their kids. Like, this is important for us to be investing in ourselves, and that just sets a very cool example. for their kids to follow.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because obviously this podcast and what I teach it does encompass a lot of just overall health, right? Like I'm teaching women about their hormones, and I'm teaching them about how their bodies are designed to feel. And it's a recurring theme that I keep coming back to on so many episodes, where I've said, even when we look at health, right? When we look at our fitness and nutrition, so many women, the excuse that I get is, oh my gosh, I could never have time for that, because they're prioritizing, of course, their kids and their spouse and their family and all the different hats that they wear. But at the same time, it's exactly what you said. Like, how can you pour from an empty cup?
Right.
And I know for me, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, women in general just tend to put themselves on the back burner. And I think that's what's so powerful in having a life coach, whether it's, again, somebody working with you one-on-one or some sort of mastermind setting, because you really, you can't, you have to kind of like step off that back burner a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of have to say, because there's somebody holding you accountable, because there's somebody saying to you, like, well, aren't you important? Aren't you, like, how can we bring you forward and really help you get better so that you can be better for everybody else? And so I know for me, like, I'm constantly preaching, get your hormones tested, check that check engine light. Like, it's not okay to live in a state of low energy. It's not okay to feel bad just because you want to make sure everybody else is okay. So I love that you just went there with the conversation.
Well, yeah, because I think, being especially, I know you serve a lot of moms, and it's wonderful being a mom, but that's not all that you are. You're not, quote unquote, just a mom, right? It's a significant role that you have, but there's more to you than just being a mom, and being a mom is phenomenal. And I think as you continue to invest in yourself and just developing your purpose, and those things will change and shift over time, as your priorities shift and change, and that you're feeding yourself. It's only going to help feed your kids and your spouse, and again, those that you interact with. So yeah, it seems like a selfless thing to do, to put yourself on the back burner, but in reality, that's, again, I think that's the word misnomer keeps coming to mind, but I think that's just, it's just that's not accurate by constantly doing that. It's because I know your podcast is all about health, and this is part of your health, right? This is part of your mental well-being and your emotional well-being, that you're developing who you are, the things that you love, your passions, or maybe even discovering what your passions are, because those can change too. And sometimes just having somebody, again, whether it's in a one-on-one setting or in a group setting, just being able to ask some questions and giving you some space, because you mentioned how it's like, I have the gift of pause, right? And I think it is a gift to give somebody that gift of space to be able even to think, because our world is, right, we're just so surrounded by noise, the demands of family and work, or just constant access, right? This phone, as beautiful as gift that can be, we're constantly being bombarded. So just to be able to shut those things off, to be able to focus on yourself, to say, yeah, who am I? What is it that I want? What is it that I want to do or be or become or accomplish? Yeah. So it's giving yourself the gift of that time and space. I know sometimes feels like that's impossible. But gosh, I think it's a gift that not only you give yourself, but those, again, that you love.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think, you just said this, but I think in our society today, like, we are so quick, and I know myself included, so quick to want to respond. When someone's talking, your brain automatically starts thinking about what you're going to say next, as opposed to, how can I give this person space to finish their thought? And that really points us in the direction of something I wanted to talk about, which is self-awareness. When I think back to my world as a corporate employee, working my way up the corporate ladder, craving this, what I would call professional development, right? Like, looking for more in my career, I found myself sort of constantly in the environment of toxicity. There was a lot of toxicity in my work environment where the people were just unhappy. You know, a lot of them were also inactive and not making the healthiest habits. And so I just felt like I was in this environment, sort of the water cooler mentality of like, you know, sitting in the break room and hearing about everybody's complaints. And that type of situation has not necessarily, it's not like I stepped out of that into this, like into the light, right? Like that can you can tend to find yourself in those types of situations throughout your life. But I remember like there were so many days in a row that I was just showing up to this water cooler, this negative environment, until finally one day my husband said, "Why are you entering the room? Like, why are you going in? Why are you, inviting yourself in?" And I've had that same, like he's had to say that to me multiple times. Like there have been other times in my life, like years later, where I've come out of situations feeling anxious or nervous or feeling like there's this sort of negative environment that I've been involved in. And then having him say, as that source of accountability, and to say like, "Hey, again, you just entered the room. Like, why do you keep entering the room?" And so I'm using that analogy because I think it's powerful to think about like, what are the rooms you're walking into, whether it's in your relationships or in your work or whatever, that are not serving you, that are not helping you grow. I mean, Amy just mentioned, that, what is the saying? Like aging is going to happen no matter what, but growth is optional. Right. And I just botched it, but basically that's the concept.
Yeah.
But, and it's, I think for me, when I look back in my 20s and I was in that life, I just assumed that getting older and grinding every day and clocking the clock was going to get me to the next level, like over, I was just going to constantly be rising, when in reality, I was just entering the same room that was not serving me and it was not helping me level up. So I love that you mentioned it was brief, but it was powerful, like surrounding yourself with positive people. But what are some other things in your mind that women in particular can do to really start to have that self-awareness that maybe there are certain relationships or environments that they are part of that are not helping them grow?
That's a great question. And, forgive me for referring, but this is the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth is one of my favorites of John's books. I mean, he's written like 100 books, but I haven't read them all. But there is one of my favorite chapters in that book is the law of environment. And it's not just physical environment, although that's a piece. It's also people environment. And because the thing is, we are constantly, again, being bombarded by things. And so I think it's taking time to pause. And because again, I think because our culture is so go, 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 we don't take time to do this, to stop and say, okay, let's physical environment. What's my physical environment? What is benefiting me? And what is not? Like if I'm in a 5x5 whatever room or cubicle with no windows, right? And over time that can be really draining, let's say. So just the physical environment, some of the toxicity can come even from that, the air you're breathing, what you're, right, again, from the health standpoint, what am I eating, what am I drinking? And I think the piece though that can, is the people environment too. So when I do a mastermind, I will say, okay, there are 2-minute people, 2-hour people, and 2-day people, or, you can put any time frame on that, right? And so you think about, okay, who are the people in my life that I'm giving, access to my life, to speak into my life, that I want to remain there. And some people I'm like, gosh, I don't want them there anymore. I need to adjust who I'm allowing to speak into my life. So, and the thing is too, as you start to grow and the people around you don't, right, that gap is going to grow and they're not going to like that. And again, it's not to say you get rid of them, but it's like, but I need to adjust how much time I spend with them because they're wanting to keep me where I was. So I think knowing that it's okay to get new people, especially as if you're wanting to grow and develop in an area, it's like, and these people are not a good influence, then making that tough decision to say, I love you and I'm going to continue to love you, but the amount of time I get,
Mm-hmm.
I give to you is going to change, or that I give you access to. So I think too,
Yeah.
it's just really assessing, to who am I allowing to speak into my life? And again, that's, may not even be aware. Okay, I know we're talking about awareness, self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So really being able to pause and then, or there could be people in your 2-minute category that, I want to put them in my 2-hour category because, man, they're quality, and I want to have them more speaking into my life, and just being surrounded by them and being impacted by who they are. And because it does, it's like, I think it was Jim Rohn, who was a self-improvement guru, who talks about that we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time around. So who are those 5 people that you would say you spend the most time around? And then just, yeah, and how are they impacting me? Because I think, we know when we're feeding our body junk, we know, like, okay, that's not good for me, but sometimes we don't even realize the things that we're
Mm-hmm.
allowing in mentally. Now in this piece, it's like, okay, what am I listening to? What am I watching? Because
Mm-hmm.
those things impact how we think. And so, am I spending hours on Facebook or Instagram or whatever? Again, it's not to down, I mean, social media, there's a lot of great things about it, but there's also can be a lot of negativity, or how much
Mm-hmm.
news or whatever, right? Again, there's a lot of things that can affect how we think and how we view life,
Yeah.
and just being aware that those things are having an impact. So just assessing that and how much I'm allowing that to, because I think sometimes too, like I can feel agitated, and I'm like, gosh, I need to turn this off. I'm not even
Yeah.
realizing how much this music or this constant negativity I'm hearing from the news is impacting me. I absolutely need to be aware of what's going on in the world, but there is
Mm-hmm.
a limit to what I can handle and want to take in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. So again, it's
I
just,
love.
I think it's just being, like you said, self-aware of who I want around me that's going to help
Mm-hmm.
benefit, if I can quickly, just because I've used this example with you too. It's like when you're growing, it's like there's this example of how you have a bucket of crabs, right? And there's a crab that's trying to get out of the bucket, and the other crabs will pull that crab back in because they don't want that crab to get out, and it'll continue to try to get out, and eventually they'll kill the crab. Um, and so in a sense, right, it's like as you grow and are trying to get out of the bucket of where you've been, you're going to have people in your life that are in a sense trying to keep
Mm-hmm.
you there and drag you back down. And so it's just being aware of that. And it's like, I love you, but I'm going to release you and find a new group of people that's going to continue to feed and um, foster this kind of growth environment I want to be a part of.
Yeah. Okay. So that leads us perfectly into something that I wanted to make sure that I have you say recorded,
Mhm.
because I've heard you say it so many times
Uh-oh,
to
I hope
my
I say
team.
it.
Yeah, you will. Like you said it so many times to my team, and hopefully you guys that are listening are getting value from this, because I know I can hear Amy say the same things 100 times, and every time it hits me differently. And so one of the things that she has continuously mentioned, to my team through virtual masterminds, which have been absolutely game changing for so many of us as individuals, is this concept of the terror barrier.
Hmm.
And what happens when we start to really say, okay, now I have this self-awareness, like all of a sudden I'm starting to notice the environments in which are making me anxious, or they're not serving me, or the relationships that are pulling me back into the bucket, right? Like, and so first of all, if I had $1 for every woman who has started their own business or started their own endeavor, and they really start to believe in themselves, and then they've had even family members and people close to them start to pull them back into the bucket, and they give into that thought process of like, of course I'm not good enough. And so those insecurities start to come out. And I definitely want to make sure we get there too in the conversation. But for now, I want you to talk to us about what is the terror barrier,
Yeah.
and how can this apply to this, exactly what we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. So anytime that, right, that we're growing, going into the unknown, doing something new, getting to another level, right? Yeah, you come up against, like, we call this the terror barrier. And what that means is, right, it's like, okay, you start having all these doubts, these thoughts, like she was saying, like, oh gosh, you don't know enough, you've never done this before. Who do you think you are, right? Those those thoughts that just, nibble away at you, those negative things. And that is so, it is normal for that to happen when we're going into something new and different and just uncharted territory. And there's two responses that you can have, right? You can go back to your comfort zone, the status quo, right? Or you can press through the terror barrier to get to that next level of growth. And you know what? We've experienced that throughout our life. You think about just even going to school for the first time, kindergarten or whatever, or pre-K, and then going to your next grade, or going from elementary to junior high to high school, whatever, high school, college, you get married, you have a kid. I mean, all these transition points create this kind of terror barrier. And that's why it's so important to have a group around you that's encouraging you and fostering this, because that time when you're wanting to just like, oh my gosh, I need to just stay where I am, right? Kind of wrap ourselves in that security blanket. And you're like, no, you can do this. And, you think about all the different terror barriers you've kind of walked through in the past, but didn't even know that we were doing. And you're still standing, right? You're still living, and you've grown as a result. And there's an example I share with this as well. Like when, there's an airplane, right, that can break the sound barrier. And when it gets to that point where it's about to break through, the airplane is like vibrating violently. And if that plane were to stop or to slow down, it would literally explode into a million pieces. What that plane has to do is to accelerate through that sound barrier to get to the other side. And so in a sense, that's, I know sometimes we literally are physically, shaking because we're just like so nervous or scared. And again, that's why you need people around you to just say, oh, it's okay. Hi, Ellery. That it's okay, to it's okay to feel this way. It's normal, but I want to continue to help you press through to get to the next side of growth. Because that's where growth happens, is outside our comfort zone. I think it's Abraham Maslow that says, it's like you either move backward towards safety or forward toward growth. You notice that there's not this staying still. There really isn't, because time keeps moving. So we're either moving backwards or we're going forward, and we want to keep moving forward. And it doesn't matter. It can be the smallest of steps, but as you continue to take those steps. And so I think it's getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because it's uncomfortable to get outside of that comfort zone, but yet that's, again, where growth happens. And when you get comfortable with that, I think it's like, or just understanding, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Okay, that's a good thing, because that means I'm growing.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to say too, just as a personal testimonial, that, I said at the beginning, I think that obviously Amy was put into my life at the right time, because I think at the time that we started working together, I was finding myself up against these pretty large terror barriers for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest one that I've ever faced, that I've had to face multiple times, is this sort of fear of success. And I see this happen a lot with women, where it's like they start to see, okay, I can see this sort of success in my career or whatever coming my way. Am I ready for it? Can I handle it? Right. And so just having you and having, this just space to slow down and to like just sort of assess, like, this is what's happening, like almost like stepping out of your body and saying, okay, like, this is what's happening in my life right now. It's okay. And this is how I'm going to kind of break through that barrier. So thank you for doing our little analogy for everybody listening. Cause I think I know my team of health coaches has constantly referred to that as being such a powerful feeling, because now that you have that awareness, when you come up against it, you have words to put to it. You can say, like, this is what I'm experiencing.
Well, and to know that it's normal, because absolutely, it's like when you're growing, of course, you haven't done this yet. You may not know how to do it yet, but if you think about all the different things in your life that you didn't know how to do, that you need to try. Because I know for me, and maybe you're going to get here, Jenny, because we talk about the things that can trip us up. Fear of failure is a big one for me. And because I don't want to look
Mhm.
stupid or foolish in front of people. And I've had to, that's going to be, I'm sure, a lifelong thing for me, but to continue to not worry about looking foolish, because no one is good at something right away. So we just need to get over that. Because I know it's like, I want to be great at something right away. And
Mhm.
it's like, that's just an unrealistic expectation that I've placed on myself. And I'm getting better at just being like, no, let's go have some fun and try something new. And you get
Yeah.
better at it by just doing it. Right. And yeah, doing it over and
Yeah.
over and learning and growing and all that. So
Yeah.
it's
And isn't
yeah,
it funny? Like the first thing that comes to my mind is the fact that, a grown adult woman, right, will try something new and just say, oh, see, I wasn't good at it. And they'll just immediately resort to those insecurities and stop.
right.
But yet they're the same mother who takes their kid to soccer for the first time. And when their kid
Yeah,
says, I'm so bad at it, they say, well, you can't quit. You have to keep going. You have to keep trying. Right. And so, how many
right.
times in our life are we telling our children, not to give up on themselves and it's okay to be uncomfortable and walking with
Yeah.
them through transitions, but yet we come up
Mm,
against those same barriers and we back down and we get
yeah.
pulled back into the
We
bucket.
need to
Yeah.
listen to our own, right? Our own counsel. And you think about
Yeah.
too, like when you learn, even like you think back when you were a kid and you were learning to ride a bike, right? You didn't know how to do it right away, but you'd, fall, get back up, fall, or
Yeah.
even just learning how to walk. You
Right.
just kept trying until, gosh, if I quit the first time I tried to learn how to walk, I'd be still crawling today. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think sometimes we just remind ourselves that,
Yeah.
yeah. And that feeling, that kind of scared, that's a natural and normal way to feel, and not allowing that to determine what we do or don't do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, we are going to go with this direction with this because I think that, I have mentored and coached several women
mhm.
in business, and it also feels like in life, right? Because especially in a network marketing business, it's so intertwined into your life. Like it's usually not the priority, right? Like women who are in a network marketing business are doing it because it fulfills something in them and it helps their
Mhm.
family potentially earn extra income. But usually, it's not the primary focus. And so in mentoring women, I feel like one of the things that I see, and also something that I struggle with as well, is perfectionism.
Mm,
And this idea that, like, well, if I can't do it 100% amazingly well or better than the other person, then I shouldn't do it at all. And so can you just touch on for us, like, I know in the 15 invaluable laws of growth, which of course we will
yep.
link up in the show notes, John Maxwell talks about
Yeah.
this perfection gap. So I would love for you to talk to our listeners about that too.
Yeah. Yep. And that's in the law of intentionality. He talks about these gaps because the biggest gap is between what we know and what we do. And so he gave different gaps, different names, and perfection gap and the mistake gap are my two top ones. And I think I know a lot of women um, struggle with the same, because I think with the perfection gap, right, we want to have it perfect before we get started. And
Mhm.
there's really no such thing. We can't know what's going to work perfectly, if ever, right? Before we even get started, because even with the plan that we create, once we put it into place, we realize, oh gosh, I thought that was going to work and it didn't, and we need to tweak it. And that's just life. But what happens is, because we want it perfect, then we end up getting paralyzed and we don't
Mhm.
do anything. And that's a tragedy too, because I think there's a lot of dreams that get stalled out, um,
Mhm.
because we feel like we don't have the perfect plan in place, or we need it just so before we get started. And
Yeah.
one of the things a mentor, I even have a little sticker in my room, because he talks about suspend the need to know how. And that's helped me a lot, because that can totally get me stuck, because I can dream of something or think something's a great idea, and then I start thinking about how to do it, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, especially if it's something new and beyond me at the moment, right? I'm not going to know how to do it.
Mhm.
um and so then again, a dream can die because I'm stuck there. So I think as we dive in, it's being willing to step forward, even in the unknown, and knowing that the how will come, but just putting putting their first step out there, and taking the risk.
Mhm.
Because I think, when we take that step, this is when it's kind of, this is where like the law of magnetism kind of comes in the sense that, like, when we start moving toward a goal, we start attracting the people and the resources that we need. I think so many times we're standing still, expecting things to come to us first, the things that we need, the people that we need before we get started, and it just doesn't work that way. And as we start heading, just taking initial steps, then all of a sudden, too, I think our awareness is
Mhm.
looking for things and for people, right, and resources, but those things start getting drawn to us as well. So it's just, and it continues to grow and develop as we go along. So and really, and this was an eye-opener for me. I was reading, there's a book by Beth Moore called So Long, what is it? Imperfection, wait.
So Long Insecurity.
Insecurity, thank you. Yeah. So Long Insecurity, You've Been a Bad Friend to Us. And one of the things she said in that book was how perfectionism is actually an insecurity. And I thought, whoa. And because when we feel insecure in an area, we tend to get so zeroed in on something that we can be perfect at, that so that it draws attention away from that. And so that was just a real eye-opener for me, like,
Yeah.
okay, where am I feeling insecure that I'm so needing to be perfect in this area so that
Mhm.
people don't see this part of me? Because I think it's all part of being aware, and then also embracing all of who we are, our insecurities
Yeah.
and all, because we all have them. And I know for me, that's been a growth area for me, to just being more vulnerable and open with the places I feel insecure or weak. And because we're not going to be good at everything. And again, that's the beauty of having people come around you, like whether it's, in a team environment, a work environment, that you have people that are good at things that you're not. And that's the beauty. I think that's a beautiful thing that I continue to develop. That's why it's so important, as you, in the whole personal growth realm, knowing what you're good at, because I think also as women, we have a hard time saying what we're good at, because we think it's
Yeah.
arrogant. And again, it's one thing. Again, it's kind of the motive and the attitude of your heart when you're speaking it. But I think, no, there's a difference between arrogance and confidence. And when you know what you're good at, there is beauty in that, because that's where you want to zero in on developing and growing,
Right.
because you're going to get the greatest return there, and the greatest, joy and pleasure being able to utilize those strengths and gifts of yours. And
Yeah.
then, surrounding yourself with people who are gifted in other ways.
Yeah. It's that whole idea of, there's no such thing as failure. You either succeed or you grow. Right. Like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so how can you sort of do it afraid? How can you do it afraid? And how can you just be willing to, live just a hair outside of your comfort zone so that you can constantly get better? My favorite quote of all time is it's actually, I have it in my office in multiple places. It is, if you want something that you've never had, you're going to have to do something you've never done.
Absolutely.
And I sometimes have to look at that every day to remind myself that if I feel uncomfortable, I'm probably in the right place. If it's a healthy uncomfortable, of
Right.
course.
Right.
But I think the other thing that I just wanted to mention too about this is, I know I speak for myself, that sometimes what can hold me back, and what I see hold a lot of women back when it comes to this perfectionism idea, is that they're looking at the whole staircase. They're looking at the whole staircase and they're so afraid to take the first step. And my mom used to say about me when I was a kid, she used to say, oh my gosh, Jenny doesn't see the forest, she sees every tree, right? Like, she's so worried. I'm so worried about all the little things that I just paralyze, it can paralyze me. And so I think that's the same thing for women. Obviously I work with health coaches who are trying to spread the message of healthy living for their families. And a lot of times, especially in American society, they can be ridiculed for that. They can start to share, things about what they're doing for their health and fitness, and people can start to shame them. Like, no one wants to see your workout videos, or no one wants to see your food, right? Like, there's so many different things that we can hear. And then we let that voice like deter us. And at the same time, it's like, no, like, again, those are those crabs in the bucket trying to pull you down. But how can you just keep taking the next step? Like, keep taking, and I look back on my business was built on social media, and I look back at social media posts that I made 12 years ago and I cringe, like, oh my gosh, was I saying that? But at the same time, it's what brought me to
Yeah.
where I am, and that's the only way that you can get better is to grow through it and to take the next step. So,
Yeah.
well, as we wrap up, I
Absolutely.
mean, obviously I knew coming into this interview that we would never touch on even just the surface of all the things that I know you've helped me with. And I'm hopeful that we can have you back as a guest again for maybe a part 2. But for now, can you tell us, you've
Yeah.
mentioned a couple of resources. You've
Yeah.
mentioned the 15 Valuable Laws of Growth by John Maxwell, which I will link up. And I also know that John Maxwell has a leadership podcast that is incredible as well.
Yes, he does.
And then you mentioned the So Long Insecurity, You've Been a Bad Friend to Me by Beth Moore. Are there other resources that you might mention specifically for women that you would check out?
Oh, that's a great question, Jenny. And I know, because it really kind of depends on what it is that you're wanting to, how you're wanting to grow. I think, honestly, I think I would, I'll add one more, and I read more than John Maxwell, trust me, but just because I think when I think about leadership, if that's what if you're wanting to grow as a leader, I think one other great resource to have on your shelf is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And again, it gives you just some tracks to run on to start your journey. And again, there's so much more. And that's where I can, it's more having a conversation, and I can direct you in some other ways to give more specifics, depending on what you're wanting to do and how you're wanting to grow. But those are, some broader topics that I think would be great. But as far as the personal growth thing, John says the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth is kind of like the personal growth Bible. It's a fabulous way. I take every team that I work with through that book first, unless there's another specific thing that they're wanting to do. That's where I always default to, because it's a fabulous place to begin.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you just said what you said, because it's like when people ask me, what are the best supplements that a woman should take for her hormone health? I say to myself, like, well, I don't know. It just depends on your imbalances and where you're struggling. Right. And so the same thing's true for personal growth. Like, yes, the 15 Valuable Laws of Growth is going to meet everybody where they are. And it's going to be a great sort of, like she said, like a Bible or main reference. But when it comes to struggles that you're having individually, it might just be worth reaching out to Amy to see, where should I begin? And so, Amy, can you tell us, where can people find you?
Yeah,
get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So, I have a website, amysnowcoaching.com, and there's a place you can fill out some information there to get a complimentary coaching session. And then from there, whether you're interested in potentially, just one-on-one, if you're just wanting to know, hey, where could I start based on where I'm at, I'm happy just to have that conversation with you. If you're interested in some coaching, or even becoming a part of, Jenny and I have mentioned the mastermind, and that's a small group of people that, want to grow. And we dive into a book and not only study it, but then say, okay, how do I want to apply something I'm learning, and really have accountability. And it's just a phenomenal group. I have a local one that Jenny's a part of. We sometimes meet in person, sometimes virtually. If that interests you to become a part, so that, with the virtual one, you don't need to be local. Like, that's the beauty of it, right? We have people from all over that can become a part of that. So, or if maybe you're part of a smaller group or at work or something, you'd want to do something like that. That's things I love to do, is to help facilitate those discussions and that growth and action in you. So, so I think that's the, main place. I'm on Facebook and Twitter as well. So I can give you my handles on that. So
okay, perfect. Well, we will link all that up in the show notes, but it's amysnowcoaching.com. We'll also put her social handles there. I know for me and for everyone, the key to self-improvement is application. And I was somebody who was listening to podcasts day in and day out, reading books, and not always applying what I was reading. And so working with a life coach, working with Amy, has been life-changing for me, just because it gave me accountability and it gave me an action plan. And so I just want everybody to listen, that's listening today, to know that, everything starts with self-awareness, but it ends with intentionality, and you get better through intentionality. And so if you can apply what you're learning, and if you can keep taking that next step, it's totally worth it. So Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. I know we'll have you back on in the near future. So Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
absolutely.
We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Jenny.
All right. Bye-bye.